Good morning, LinkedIn family. Happy Friday, April 8th. It's so good to be here with you all as we talk about 5 steps to building your personal brand on LinkedIn. I have the amazing Marie Zimenoff with me today, who is the CEO of Career Thought Leaders and Resume Writing Academy. I had the honor of going through the certified personal brand strategist program recently. And now Marie and I are connected. We want to give you more support around building your personal brand and understanding what is even personal branding.
Yeah,
So before we get started, I'm going to allow Marie to introduce herself.
well, Cassandra, it's so nice. Thank you for having me, and it's nice to be on this show with you and just chat about what personal branding is. So, as you said, I lead organizations in the career services space. So, we train career service providers and coaches and resume writers and thin profile writers so that they can have better outcomes for their clients. And
Mm-hmm.
we've been working in personal branding for quite a while. We've been teaching the personal branding class that you took for about 6 years under our
Wow.
umbrella, and before that, it was with Reach Personal Branding. So it's been around a while, since 2000. That seems seems a little ancient now, but it's been around since 2000 as the
Wow.
foundational personal branding program.
That is so neat. And as we have guests join, I'd love to for you to comment on where you're tuning in from this Friday morning. Before we get started, I'll let people. I know we got started a little late with some technical difficulties, per the usual, but we but we made it. I hope you can hear us. Okay, let me know too on the sound. I think I'm. It's a little hard to hear Marie. I don't know if you can turn up your volume or not, Marie, or maybe it's just me. I have my volume pretty much all the way up. But anyways, otherwise I can hear you. It's just a little bit challenging. Okay, cool. Monica, thanks for joining us, Spartanburg, South Carolina. So a big part of my audience too, Marie, is Christians and believers in Christ as well. So I will have some of those joining us today who are looking to transition into a new career. Right, we have the Great Resignation going on as well, and people are starting to think about what they want to do outside their 25, 30 career and whatever industry they've been in. So I hope this really helps those who are just struggling and trying to figure out what their next move is and seeking God and guidance in the process. And I really hope that today's session will just help you kind of peel back like the wilds of LinkedIn, so to speak, and give you a way to start building your personal brand even today. So Monica said it is hard to hear. So is it just hard to hear both of us? What is it? Yeah, I don't know if there's anything I can do on my end with audio. I think I've I could. Let's try this. All right, Monica, let me know if this sounds any better.
Yeah, I try to move towards my mic a little bit more too and see if that helps.
Yeah, let us know if that helps any, and we're gonna just continue going. If we need to like speak a little louder, if that helps, we will do that. I'm typically pretty soft spoken, so I can. Corey said it's good to hear, good on his end. Okay, great. Oh, great, awesome. Thank you for that. Jacksonville, North Carolina, Spartanburg, South Carolina. So we got the Carolinas with us this morning. Awesome. Corey, thanks for joining. Monica, Rayshert. Sorry if I not didn't pronounce that correctly. Anyways, great. Well, we'll just get right into it, and we want to respect your time as well. Okay, I can't. I can hear you well. I just can't hear your guest. Okay. So Marie moved a little closer to the mic, so we're hoping that that helps a little bit. I'm not a tech person, so I can't be as a big help to Marie too and troubleshoot. But I think that if you get a little closer, maybe that will help. There's some background noise on Marie's end. Thanks for that, Albert. But can hear you both. Okay. So maybe we'll just do that. I can hear, I don't hear the background noise anymore for Marie. So maybe we'll just do the best we can. Thank you for that. So, step one to building your personal brand on LinkedIn is understanding what personal branding even means. A lot of us don't even know that word is thrown around a lot. So, I'd love for Marie to share with us, what is personal branding? What does that mean?
So I shared with you that I was on a clubhouse session recently, and someone was saying, "Oh, I'm working on my personal brand. I've got my colors," and I thought, "Oh, no, no, no." Like that is not where
Quite.
we start with our personal brand, right? When we think about our personal brand, it's really your unique promise of value. So, what do people get when they work with you? Our instructor for the certified personal branding class, she talks about it as the experience of doing business with you, or of working with you if you're not in business. And that's what our brand really is. It's that deep part of who are you and who do people think you are, and then of course how do you show up in your world, in your life, and your work
Mm,
in your world. All three of those things together are your personal brand.
I love that. So, as a recap, personal branding isn't just your colors, your website, and all those external aspects, but really your unique promise of value. When clients work with you, what differentiates you from your competitors, the experience they get that's very unique to working with you. I really love that, Marie. Albert says your unique promise of value. That's a fantastic turn of phrase. Yes, your unique promise of value. And Marie, maybe you can expand a little bit. How do we go about identifying our unique promise of value?
Yeah, so that kind of takes us into step two, which is really understanding who you are and what you stand for at a deeper level. So, Cassandra, you help business owners, you help businesses grow, you help people with their careers. And that's what you do, but that's not really who you are, right? Who you
Mm-hmm.
are is a woman of God. Who you are is, probably many other personal things about you too. But knowing who you are then
Mm-hmm.
brings that special sauce, if you will, about how you do what you do to those activities, to the business, to your work. And without that, you're just like everyone else, and no one is like
Mm,
everyone else. So it's just figuring out what are those pieces that underlie who you are and how you do what you do and why you do what you do, because all
mm.
of those come together to really make you unique.
Wow. I really like something that Susan shared in our class together too. She asked us what our freak factor was, and I thought that was that was very quirky and different. All of us were like, "Wait, freak factor? That sounds kind of funny," but really, it's about understanding something that maybe you've hidden from most people most of your life because you've been embarrassed about it. You felt like it made you um, different and not in a good way. But I really appreciate that because a lot of us maybe want to put a front, right? An image that we think other people want us to be, or the way we should act or do business or anything, like that. So she mentioned Lady Gaga, who was alienated in high school and felt like an outcast, and that actually has become part of her mission and personal brand as a performing artist. And other people who felt the same way are attracted to her personal brand. So back to your unique promise of value, what differentiates you, makes you unique, is actually something that might be one of our what we perceive to be a weakness or a flaw.
Right. And this goes, you were talking specifically about LinkedIn. So I just say that this is what builds your about section and even your experience sections, because you want those stories, you want that content to really embody who you are, why you do what you do, and a little bit of how you do what you do, because again, that's going to differentiate you. But it's also going to make it more interesting to read. Nobody wants to read that stale, kind of corporate whitewashed bio anymore. They want to see who you are. and how you do what you do and what they can kind of get in terms of your voice, even on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think about that in my own experience too, Marie. When I first got on LinkedIn, I didn't have a product or service that I was selling, and I actually didn't know much about personal branding at the time or building an online business. So for me, it was just talking about what I was most passionate about. And I think it's kind of I'm actually grateful for the naive beginning of just sharing what I'm passionate about because it allowed me to really explore what my core beliefs and values are and share that with my community and then in turn build a tribe around those beliefs and values versus out the gate maybe pushing a product or service and not really building those genuine and lasting relationships on this platform.
Right, it's social media, and I think sometimes we forget that because it's LinkedIn and it's professional, and there are a lot of sales pitches going on. But
Yeah.
at the core, it's social. It's about that connection.
So, how does that lead into the next step, which is the external piece of building your personal brand?
Yeah, so sometimes people think their brand is all about them, but then it ends
Hmm.
up not connecting. So you've probably seen that in your life somewhere, maybe a speaker or a colleague, or even someone that posts on LinkedIn, and you think everything is just kind of flat and weird because it's all about them, which it is, but it doesn't seem to connect. And that's because they really haven't thought about who their audience is and what's
Mm.
important to their audience.
Exactly. Um, so when you're just beginning building your personal brand on LinkedIn, especially putting yourself out there and creating content maybe that you never have before then, it does feel really personal and vulnerable and intimate. So like you said, it feels like it's all about you because in a way it is initially, right? This is such a big hump to get over our fear of what other people will think of us and where do I start? I don't know what to say. Will people even like what I have to say or listen to me? So there is a piece of, we're looking for validation, from our own ideas, our opinions, our thoughts, right? We only want to be seen, heard, and valued for who we are. So then moving from that position to the external piece of understanding your audience and your community, and how you can provide value to them and help impact and change, and even change their lives. Which I have a system too, Marie, that I use with my clients called the No System. And the first step is really to knowing who you are in Christ. For me, a lot of my clients are believers and Christians, so knowing who they are, their identity in Christ versus what the world says about them. So having that confidence, I think, is a foundational to then being able to serve your community and start putting yourself out there.
Well, and I would just say that when you're feeling nervous about posting your content, it's often because you are focused on yourself and what will people think
Right.
of me or will they react to it? And I would encourage us to think about the people that we're there for. You're there on
Exactly.
LinkedIn to connect with other people. You're there on LinkedIn to help other people. And if you keep that focus, it makes it easier because it's not about what should I post to make me look good or what should I post to try to get views. If you think about what do people
So
want
true.
to hear, what will help people, you'll actually hit both birds with one stone, if you will. Because when you post to help others, when you post to answer the frequent questions that you get, or whatever it might be, you'll automatically get more engagement because you're thinking about that audience from the very beginning. And we teach our digital branding class to start with comments instead of content because that way you start to build those relationships first by commenting on other people's posts. You get ideas, you get little starters of posts by making those comments, and you get to see what types of posts are people engaging on, what types of
Exactly.
are the conversations I want to have.
Exactly. I love that. And so Albert asked the question, can you speak to the challenge of staying true to yourself and your own interests versus playing to what works as far as content creation? And I think you did a great job answering in that, Marie, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
The chasing views or doing things that you think will get a lot of likes, usually backfires because you might get a lot of views, you might get a lot of likes, but if it isn't true to who you are and what you do, it's not going to go any further than that. And in fact, you might attract some people that aren't your core audience and cause some noise for you. Comments that aren't on the right track, or connection requests that aren't on the right track. So the truer you stay to yourself, you'll get the right
Hmm.
views, the right contacts, the right comments, and that's really where you want to focus.
I think you made a great point, Marie, that staying true to yourself and creating content from your genuine passions, interests, journey, story, in the hopes of helping people navigate their own journey is really key to creating and being successful on LinkedIn and probably on any social media platform for that matter, right? You don't want to create content that is inauthentic, if that's a word, or to who you are at your core, right? Because you said it eventually maybe will fall flat, or it won't be. You'll attract people that aren't part of your tribe, or who aren't someone you want to serve necessarily. So really, it's always best to stick with being genuine and true to who you are. Next question for you, Marie, is how do you know if it's truly time to make a job or to make a job or career change? What are the signs? Maybe this is a little bit off topic, but at the same time, it's relevant as we move through the steps. Is there anything you'd like to add there?
Well, this is why personal branding is so powerful, because you can identify with that who you are, and it goes deeper than just your job. Who are you? What lights you up? What do you get up on a Saturday to do? And then when you've got that idea of what you want to do, you can have a little bit better filter in terms of what's at work and what's out of work. I actually think that a lot of our angst and frustration in the world right now is more around our avocational life than our work life, but we're trying to change jobs to fix it. And if you've read the news, you know that it didn't work. So all these people resigned and got new jobs, and now they're having a huge like, oops, that didn't work. And my belief is that we are frustrated because we don't have volunteer activities, because we can't go to events that we used to go to, those concerts, the whatever it is that you are into, avocationally outside of work. A lot of those things got taken away in COVID, and so we feel, they call it languishing. We're just not happy, and we're trying to find a new job to fix that. But a new job may
Mm,
not fix that, because you're not going to get that from work, right? You're not going to get that community. You're not going to get those interests fulfilled at work. So I think really taking a deeper dive and looking at what's missing from your life that is related to your brand and may be related to your professional life, but it may not be. And if we take that deeper
mm,
dive and really think about that, then we can see, is changing jobs really what I'm looking for? Or is there a different kind of gap that I need to fill that isn't
mm.
related to work?
I really appreciate that. I hope that helps, Corey. What other gaps might be in your life that a new job or career change won't fill? And I haven't heard of that. Avocationally, activities that fulfill us and make us feel more whole or complete or alive. And many of those have been removed because of COVID. Um, that's awesome. Okay, so also Albert asked, back to your previous point, Marie, I see people hashtagging every other word in post in the hope of getting more random eyeballs. My question is why, and what value does that provide you or them?
Yeah, that may be a little bit of a rhetorical question, but I think people do misunderstand hashtags, and especially misunderstand hashtags on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, 3 hashtags is really what you want to use. You use more than that, and your views actually start to go down, partly because of what you're saying, Albert. It gets hard to read, it feels spammy, it feels like you just copied your Instagram post and put it over here on LinkedIn. So it doesn't work. And actually, 3 hashtags is doing well on Instagram now, so you might be able to get away with that copy and paste. But there's still a different strategy between the two. Um, and LinkedIn, the hashtags, people don't really use them that well. So
Right.
the only thing you're hoping for is that by using one, you might end up in the feed of someone who is following that hashtag. But I'd agree with you. You know, keep it to three, keep it focused, and it can do a little bit for you, but there's no need to overdo it.
Yeah, I'd like to really piggyback on that too, Marie. I think to your question, Albert, a lot of people who have multiple hashtags or like a overload 15, 20 hashtags, they don't know how to use them, right? They're just trying to figure out the platform itself, and they think maybe if I create more hashtags, I'll garner more views and more engagement, and in turn increase my visibility and make more connections. And so I think a lot of those people don't know yet how to use the platform, but they're trying to learn, right? And I think that's okay. You got to start somewhere. But like Marie mentioned as well, 3 hashtags tops is a great uh, rule of thumb to stick to when you're creating posts on LinkedIn. And you can always Google and reference, the top hashtags that are being used on LinkedIn and that are most relevant to your industry. For example, entrepreneurship or innovation, technology, so that your posts populate in that thread and the people that are genuinely interested and who you probably want to connect with will see that post.
Yeah, hashtags on LinkedIn are a little bit tricky, so it's good to try to use them. Like I said, I think three is good, and yeah, you said that too. It works, and you can Google lists of the top
Exactly.
hashtags. Yeah,
Yeah, that are most relevant to you. And it also looks like you're being strategic in your use of hashtags versus, like Marie said, spammy or uh, desperate. Unfortunately, that's how it appears.
yeah. I really always just wish someone can't copied their Instagram and put it in there,
Yeah,
which is fine, but it does.
totally.
It probably does decrease your reach for many
I think
reasons.
so.
Yeah.
I think so. And that really also goes for it's connected, but tagging like so many people in your comments just in hopes that you'll get engagement or comments from that person. I think that also decreases the probability that people will want to connect. 'Cause it looks like, hey, you weren't thoughtful in who you chose to tag in your post, and it was just again sort of a spammy and disingenuine feel.
Yeah, and LinkedIn actually dings you for that. So if you tag people and
Mhm.
they don't respond, it pushes down your post because again, it the algorithm is meant to do things to improve people's feed. So we could argue whether it does that or not, but it's trying to say that if someone's tagging a lot of people who aren't responding, this is probably a spammy post, so we're going to push down its views. So when you do tag, it's thoughtful, it's a conversation, it's who do you want to bring into this conversation. And I'm always being careful about that, not just because of the algorithm, but also because it's about relationship. And I don't want to tag someone who's uncomfortable. One time I tagged someone on a joke because they were posting jokes in another platform, another group, and they wrote to me and they said, "Can you please remove me because I don't do jokes on LinkedIn?" And I thought, oh, okay. That, and
I
so that's
thought,
for me to know. I'm glad they reached out,
right.
but people's voice is different on different platforms, so now I'll be more thoughtful of that for that individual.
Great, great point, Maria. It really goes back to the goal of creating content and building a community on LinkedIn is to really connect with people that are behind the digital profiles, right? And that can be somewhat challenging because it's just a little picture and a maybe a pretty banner, so you forget there's actual human being behind that profile and going through their own journey and own struggles, and you really want to meet them where they're at and develop that relationship versus just sending an immediate pitch or spamming them by tagging them, whatever it might be. Would you do that in real life? I hope not. Albert says tag spam is super irritating. Great discussion, ladies. Awesome. Well, we'll move on to the next point, which is messaging. Is there anything else you want to say about the external piece, Marie,
No,
before we
I think
moved
we
on to
kind of
messaging?
moved into the messaging.
You're right. We did organically.
Yeah, and that idea of it is content, It also is your comments and, of course, your
Mm,
profile, because everything that you do appears in your activity feed on your profile. So if I go to Cassandra's profile and I click on activity, I'm going to see not only her posts, but also her comments. And in fact, when
so
people
true.
ask me to connect, which I encourage anyone on here to do, but when you ask me to connect, I will go and look at your comments, because that's one way I can figure out if you're a good person for me to connect with or not. And there are certain behaviors that if I see someone's doing these behaviors, it's likely it's either a fake account or someone who's dating on LinkedIn, and I don't do dating on LinkedIn, so I won't connect with that person. That's their business, but I'm going to stay away from that. And so some of the behaviors of their comments and their likes, way more than their posts, tell
So
me, is
true.
this someone I want in my circle?
Wow. I think it's a great point. I don't often do that actually myself, to look at the activity, not only of that person, the content that they're creating, but the comments and how they're engaging with their community and really treating their community, right? So whether it's supportive or maybe not so supportive, and making a decision whether or not you want to connect with that person based on how they're engaging or not engaging with their community. I think that's a great point in messaging, commenting, vetting people who you connect with before adding them and seeing if they'll add value to your network. And if not, that's okay. I'm curious, Marie, what did you mean by dating? On
Well, you might consider this discriminatory a little bit, but I've never had an advance on LinkedIn. And I think part of it is because I go and look at people's comments and
Mm,
activity. And if the only posts they're commenting on are very obviously voluptuous women, I will say no to to that connection request. And it
yes.
took me a little while to figure that out. But since I started doing that, I've had very few of the kind of forward advances on LinkedIn. And those individuals, that's fine if that's how they're using LinkedIn, but it's not why I'm there. So I don't connect with those folks.
Same. I actually just had that experience yesterday where a gentleman was asking for help, career coaching support. And I took a look at his activity, his comments, and it was just that. Just like you said, very attractive and voluptuous women. That was all he was commenting on. So I'm like, maybe that's kind of why he was, reaching out, not necessarily for, career coaching support, but maybe for something else. And it was a hidden agenda. And I hate to, assume that, but it is important that um, it's a professional platform. LinkedIn is a professional platform. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, they're a little bit more informal and casual in their messaging and interaction. But LinkedIn, thankfully, has maintained overall, I would say, that professionalism in our communication with others. So I think it's up to us as a community to uphold that as well.
Yeah, and everybody's choosing their messaging, but I really don't think they consider how their likes and comments are being viewed by other people, and
No.
not just other people. So for you job seekers out there, there's actually software that scans your online activity and judges your personality traits for recruiters. And this sounds really it's crazy, but it's part of why managing your digital brand across all platforms in some fashion is so important. And it's not about not having a life and not, being you. It is about thinking that when you comment or when you post, those are all things that everyone can see. And it is telling people who you are, whether you think about it that way or not. And so these software, most of them are set to judge you on the big five personality traits. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're currently, or if you're constantly kind of being confrontational in your posts, you'll get
Right.
graded lower on something like agreeableness, which is one of those big five personality traits. And so, we
Wow.
can argue whether it's fair or not, but I'll just let you know that it's out there and it's being used, and everything that we do online is public.
I didn't think about that about the softwares. I mean, I was in recruiting as well, but softwares actually scan the tone of your comments and messages on LinkedIn, like you said, agreeability or divisive, or I'm not sure exactly how the negative maybe terms that the software uses, but that companies are actually looking at that and deciding to reach out to you or not based on your comments and your interactions with the community. Wow, that's really something to keep in mind as you not to fully, I suppose, uh, what would be the word, to not comment how you feel, but it adds just another layer to think about. Is this what I want to really say? Like in 10 minutes, or what would be what question can we ask ourselves, Marie, like before we comment on a post and consider before actually commenting.
Well, I always think that sharing your opinion is great. It doesn't mean
Yes.
that you need to argue with the other person. So
Mm,
Cassandra could post something and I don't necessarily agree. But instead of saying, Cassandra, I don't agree, and then going on with my point, I'll just say, and I also think this, or my point of view is that. And then I can share my point of view, even if it's contradictory to what the post is about, without having that kind of conflict.
combative. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
And
think that's
sometimes it's
great.
best just to scroll on. If it really does, have an emotional response from you, then it's probably not the best thing to post about. If it's just a professional disagreement or a different point of view that you have, share that. That's great. It'll help, spur the conversation. And then you just know that how you do it will make a big difference, which to me is important because that shows how I'd be in the workplace. Right in the workplace, would I go up to Cassandra and say, I disagree with you and this is not going to work? Or would I go
Right.
over and say, have you thought about this? Or this is my point of view. What do you think? And that just shows how I would behave in the workplace as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of controversial content in the world and in on social media as well. And I think Marie made a good point that if it does, you have an emotional trigger to a particular post, then maybe it's not the best post to respond to, or maybe you don't post that. Just depends. And like Albert says, he said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Always best to try and see the other person's point of view, right? And I think that's a great point because we can seek to understand the other person's point of view, even if we don't agree necessarily, right, with their opinion or perspective. We can seek to understand, where they're coming from, and like Marie said, be able to respectfully respond and say, and also this is my perspective and point of view on a different angle or a different take, and while still maintaining respect for the other person's perspective.
Well, and using questions in a comment on LinkedIn is a great way. So if I commented on Cassandra's post, that helps her post. If she comments back on
Exactly.
my comment, it helps her post and it helps my comment because now my comment will rise to the top of the comment thread. And so asking a question that invites Cassandra to respond back is an awesome way to start a conversation, to help her, to help me. And when we do that, we just want to be careful of the tone of that question. And I'd be careful of why questions, why do you think that? This can come across as
Right.
that, dig, or, what in your background led to that decision, which may be a kind of roundabout, but just really thinking about if you're going to ask a question, is it really a question or is it a dig? If it's a dig, the person will feel that on the other side, and everybody who's reading all the comments will feel that, and it may
True.
elicit a negative response from the person that you didn't intend.
That's very true. And it sounds like you use maybe more coaching questions where you're like seeking to understand, right, in your time with your clients. Do you do that on LinkedIn as well? And uh, that spurs a more fruitful conversation than a combative, like you've mentioned, or conflictual tone in your messaging. So I appreciate that, and I think that goes back to how comments are so valuable, and they can even be more important than just creating content itself.
Yeah, and then I'm talking about content. It really is, to me, easier and more fruitful if we think about what will be beneficial to our audience. Yes, we're going to tell our stories. If you tell that story in a way that is connecting to what your audience wants to know, it will ring so much truer. And sometimes I'll tell a story that doesn't necessarily have that connection, but most of the time, I'm telling the story on LinkedIn because
Mm.
when it happened, I saw a connection. So I wrote a story the other day that I hit my 3-year-old son in the head with the car door at his daycare. And I just
Oh
felt,
no.
I know, it felt
Terrible.
horrible. He started to cry right away. And
Oh,
but I told the
Marie.
story, I know, I told the story about how he just stood there and cried, kind of unabashedly, right? He didn't, little kids don't
Right.
care. They don't have that, oh, I'm going to hide
Filter.
my face. Um, and so, what would it be like if, when something bad happens to us, we just let ourselves experience it instead of holding it in or trying to have the brave face? Because oftentimes that means that one, we don't let other people help us, and two, we
Mm.
carry it around for longer than we need to. So he cried really hard for like 30 seconds, and then he ran into daycare like nothing had happened. So it's, I just, that was the lesson for me, was that how fast
Wow.
he moves through it because he let himself feel.
Wow. So that's a great lesson that you shared right on LinkedIn. So we can have these normal experiences, everyday experiences, like Marie had accidentally bumping her 3-year-old son's head, but then reflecting on that and what does that mean in our in the workplace or in our professional life, and translating that experience into a life lesson. So I think this is coming full circle to how do you stay true to yourself and be authentic versus trying to create content that you think will garner more attention. I think Marie gave a great example. Just write down, jot down, keep it in your notes in your phone, experiences you've had, interactions, conversations you've had with family, with colleagues, with friends that really get you to think. And how can this benefit my community or my audience on LinkedIn, and help them maybe solve a challenge or that they're going through right now? Because at the end of the day, we're all, we have different journeys, but we're all really going through a lot of the same struggles. I think COVID really has put us under this umbrella. We're all experiencing the effects of isolation, and like you said, not being able to connect with each other. So inserting and injecting really authentic and stories that are true to ourselves will make people feel like, hey, Marie's relatable and I can connect and relate to her. You could have easily not shared that story and been like, oh, I don't want to share that story for fear of what people will think about me, right? But you really turned a negative into a positive.
Well, and what I love about those too is that then people commented, and I read their comments and I got to thinking, I was like, probably one of the other big lessons is that he could shut the car door himself. He's big enough now, he could shut the car
Very
door
true.
himself, and like then he wouldn't get hurt. But it's also that sometimes we're over controlling, or we don't ask for help. And so I
Wow.
thought, oh, that's interesting. It's even a deeper lesson for me. But it's part of
Wow.
why I enjoy the conversations that happen on LinkedIn, because I hope other people will gain some insight. But then people comment and share their stories, and I learn about them, and that's
Yes.
deeper insight.
Exactly. So the more genuine and authentic you can be in creating content, the better it will do in the long run. Because remember, building your personal brand is a long-term game. It's not an overnight, thing. I think we see a lot of people on social media, hitting six figures in 6 months, and I've, created all this success in a very short amount of time. And so we want that. We want that instant gratification of building a large following and a business. But I think when you look at it as you would develop a relationship in person, that takes time, right? You have to allow people to get to know you, to like you, to trust you, to eventually potentially do business with you, or create a mutually beneficial relationship. So that's really what you're doing when you're creating authentic content on LinkedIn, is being true to who you are, but then allowing others also to do the same.
Right? And it can be inspiring for other people to feel like, well, now I could share that story, or even in my comments,
Exactly.
sharing a little bit of their story. And I love that part of it too, especially since I help other business owners. If I can help them get that feel of, oh, this is how I could share, that it's a double bonus.
Exactly. So by you being genuine and authentic to yourself, you're subconsciously giving permission for people to do the same. If they felt, unsure of themselves and what other people are going to think of them, or they don't know where to start, this allows them to give a simple start, right, of who they are and, what they're passionate about. And by seeing you demonstrate that same, behavior, that gives them, permission to do the same. And we're all learning in the process. No one's arrived. We're all, this is all a work in progress, and a lot of it is experimenting. And I think that's okay. I think we have to be okay with experimenting too, and not having this strict, necessarily like step by step framework that we all want. But sometimes it's okay to experiment and try things out and see what feels good to you when creating content.
Yeah. Well, and it's all about the relationships and the community. And if that's not why you're there, it will be hard to maintain, not just because you may not get as many views, but because it's a lot of effort. And so, yeah, there's big names that have a staff that's pushing out content for them,
Yeah,
but most of us aren't that, right? And so, if
that's
you're
very
going to
true.
keep that consistency, it's got to be more organic for you.
Yes, exactly. So when you have a post that comes to mind, you can jot it down and post it. And yes, it does a help to have a picture with it because we just enjoy seeing faces and connecting with people that way. So I tend to notice that, when I post a picture with a text post, it tends to do better just because people do appreciate connecting, and seeing that, facial recognition. But yeah, it does not have to be overly complicated like we make it out to be. I think we tend to overcomplicate content, and it actually can be a lot simpler than we think.
Yeah, and if you know what you stand for, so that foundation
Exactly.
part of the brand, then you can tie those stories back to that pretty easily because that's what you're there for. And so if your story is about, you know, hitting your kid in the head, if you're a business owner, your story might be different than that. If you're a career person like I am, right, it was kind of that career ask for help, don't be afraid to show other people who you are kind of post. So the lessons that you get from it probably organically has to do with what you stand for. But when you're really clear on that, it's much easier to connect the organic stories to your knowledge base of why someone would keep following you for similar lessons at the next post.
That's great. And actually, that goes back to the class that I just went through and understanding your core beliefs and values that we, had a checklist and assessment that we went through. And there's, loads of different assessments out there that can help you identify, um, of course, your strengths, but then also your values. I think it's VIA, the website, and it helps to extract some of those values so that that you can see the congruency in your content. Like you mentioned, if you really value creativity or spirituality, for me, faith, right, that comes out, in my content, that can be become part of your core brand values, so that you are consistent and congruent in the content that you post and the messaging and tone. And if something is off, you can always look back at that and choose to post that, even if it feels a little bit off, knowing that, hey, these are my core brand values, but I'm going to take this, a step outside my comfort zone too, and experiment a little bit. But I think it is helpful, like you mentioned, Marie, to understand the foundational elements of what your brand is before you um, start creating content.
Yes, and well, so the last step that we were going to talk about is
Exactly.
Youve, which is kind of that visual piece. And you'll notice that that's last, and
Visuals.
it's oftentimes where people start. But once you know who you are and who your audience is, then you can think about what visuals really make sense to include in your posts. So I do include pictures of my kids every once in a while, but not that frequently because I don't want that to be a huge part of my brand on LinkedIn. And but it is, obviously a big part of who I am. So we choose those visuals, the colors, the people, all of the things that you're going to choose really based on what about yourself do you want to share, what about yourself do you want to include, as well as, what is your audience going to connect with. And, when we think about it from the very foundation
Mm.
up, then the visuals aren't really an afterthought. They're part of the bigger picture, whether that's your LinkedIn, background, your LinkedIn headshot, and then of course the photos that you might post with your posts. All of that is going to come into play, but it really is springing out of that deeper work.
Mm. So that's really the last step versus the first step. I think you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, right? Like I'm working on my personal brand and my website, my colors and fonts, and I think that's a fun like place to be. I think that's why people immediately attach themselves to doing that work because it's very outward and you can see the results in a pretty website and pretty colors, right? It makes you feel like you're doing work, and it's kind of the easier work versus doing the internal work. The internal work is a little harder. How many of us take time to really understand who we are and what value we offer to the world? We're constantly doing and taking time to really understand who Marie is at your core and what value you offer to your audience. I think is something that not everyone um, does. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, it's harder, and oftentimes people will come to me. I don't know if this happens to you, and they'll want to start right at the messaging. They help me with my profile.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
profile is not going to be
Yes.
engaging if we don't know who you are.
Exactly. And I'll be honest too, as a early stage entrepreneur, like I started doing that with people, like starting off right at the profile, but then I kept getting to these sticking points where I realized like, oh, we have to go take a step back actually and understand who you are at your core and your identity and what lights you up, what you're passionate about before we can start, expressing that on a digital platform. So it's definitely a learning lesson even for myself, but I absolutely agree. It's easy to want to go straight to like, let's get it up. But then there's a lot of kind of blockages there because we haven't understood the first piece.
Yes, yeah. So that would be kind of my main takeaway is that if you want to attract opportunities instead of having to go out and push for them, this is the other thing people don't consider about personal branding is that personal branding isn't about being pushy. When you have a strong personal brand, that will actually attract people because it is kind of rare and also really obvious when someone knows who they are, when they're clear about their values, when they're confident in their own skin. It's so attractive. And when, bonus on top of that, they're also clear about what they do and what they want to be known for, then they don't have to push because it's consistently attracting people to them through that confidence and through that depth of understanding who they are, and then through that clarity of message around what they want to be known for. So when you have that powerful personal brand, it isn't about pushing. In fact, it's the opposite, and you'll start attracting opportunities because it is attractive. You don't. It's not about looks, but it is
No,
attractive.
no, I know what you
Yeah,
mean. Yes,
yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Yes, yes. Wow. I'm curious, Marie, for our audience members out there. And actually, I'm just thinking about a client myself too. Is I get a lot of clients and potential clients who have been in an industry for 25, 30 years, right? But now they're interested in building their personal brand, but they have passions outside of the industry they've been in, and they're really excited about other things, but they're struggling to like, well, how do I detach myself from this, this career I've had for 30 years? And I really want to explore other things that I'm passionate about that's maybe unrelated and irrelevant to the my career, so to speak. And that's really what I want to explore, but I feel like I can't because I've spent so much time there. So how do I connect the two, or how do I separate myself? Yeah, what would you say to maybe clients that are struggling with that?
That your story about where you've been is inseparable from your story about where
Exactly.
you are now and where you're
Yeah.
going. And I often work with career changers that want to, completely minimize or take things off their resume because they'll say, oh, it's irrelevant. And no, because you've learned skills in those
Yes.
experiences that have
Exactly.
made you who you are today. And that's the story that we want to uncover is one, the story of where you're headed now. And it gets easier when you do have some kind of direction because then we can go into your background and say, what from that background adds value to where you're going now. And
Mm,
it's something because we don't, there's no blank slate. I don't know. There's some famous quote about that, but I don't have it in my head right now. Like, there isn't a blank slate. That doesn't exist. And you really don't want it to, because then you'd be competing against, fresh graduates. And you
exactly.
have
Good
this
point.
of experience. It's figuring out how you want to tell the story about that connection. And that really will be easier once you figure out where you're going now. And so for that time in between, I would just stick to the stories about who you are, that core, that foundation, and kind of let some of the dis, details go for a minute. And then once you
I
figure
love
out
that.
where you're going, you can connect the threads.
So really putting a pause, on social media and then taking time to understand your story and who you are and asking, maybe even journaling, answering questions like, what am I most passionate about? Or, what does get me up on a Saturday morning, and if I won the lottery, what would I do? And, allowing you to kind of dream and imagine, uh, what it is that you would do outside of maybe the career that you've been in for so long, and then creating content from that place versus like I have to push this identity that I'm not maybe as passionate about anymore, and I'm excited to transition. So allowing those stories to come to the surface, and maybe your background to be in the background for a moment and allow people to get to just to know Marie, who accidentally hit her.
Right. And when you're in transition, it depends on how public you're being about that transition. If you're still working
Mm,
and not letting a lot of people know that you're searching, your posts may be more related to some of those daily things that you're learning, skills that are transferable to any industry, that they're really just core to who you are. And that is where you can start right now, is just communicating those core values, core skills that are really important to you while you're in the middle of figuring out where you're going to go with them next, because that will still build a strong story of who you are and of the value that you bring no matter what setting
I
you're
love
in.
that. So it sounds like I mean, we all have skills and experiences and, personality traits that really transcend any job or workplace, right? It's our why statement. It's something that doesn't change. It doesn't depend on our position or role, and allowing that to come to the surface and shine, so that when you do get a new career position, and people know who you are for who for who you are, not necessarily just what you do, or your certifications or your degrees or whatever that might be, which is an important part of your experience and journey, but um, maybe not as important as we've put so much emphasis on.
Right. And it's starting to shift, and people are open to more um, like recruiting people that don't necessarily have the exact experience that they're looking for. But it is up to the job seeker to connect those dots, to be able to share how what you've done in the past is related to what you're going to do in the future. And there's always a connection. It's just finding that connection, finding those stories that, as you say, demonstrate what you bring to everything that you do. And I'd add that to your journaling questions. What is that special thing that you bring to everything that you do? Is it a process? Is it an attitude? Is it a leadership style? Is it, as you look back through your experiences, you'll see those things of, this is how you show up, and this is the value that that has brought over and over again, and that can be translated into a new industry.
I love this, and I know we're at time, but I wanted to just say one more thing to add to your journaling prompts. I'm reading a book that's called "You Are the Brand," and he did this very exercise that Marie described, and he thought about what he's done in his job. He was a music director, so he said he wrote songs for a church. He spoke at church conferences. He trained, his colleagues, but he realized he took out all the ends and just put I write. I speak, I coach, I train. So actually, those skills can apply to any industry, or position and add value. So, consider and reflect on, what you do on a daily basis that's maybe particular to your industry, but actually you can extract those skills and it can be add value to many different environments and positions.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a great exercise. And then to tell those stories without the industry specificity. So to be able to tell those stories in a way that engages a new audience, that's what your LinkedIn profile and your resume and your interview answers are all about. So, excellent point.
Well, I really appreciate you joining this LinkedIn Live and having you as a guest, Marie. It's really been a pleasure. I learned so much from you and Susan. Um, can you tell our audience a little bit about upcoming programs that you have or ongoing programs and how they could potentially work with you or learn more about personal branding?
Yeah, so we just had our personal branding course that Cassandra took, and we just started our digital branding course, which is all about, how to use LinkedIn and how many hashtags you should use. So we talk about the big picture, what are you going to show up as, and some of the trends and specific pieces that make you more successful there. So I'm loving that course. It's one of our favorites. And we teach career coaches and resume writers how to improve their skills. So LinkedIn profile writing, our storytelling class is one of our favorites that will run this summer. How to find the hidden job market. That's who we help, and happy to connect people if they are career seeking to resources, and also obviously the career services providers. If you're looking for resources, feel free to reach out as well. So it's been so much fun, and I love your energy, and I'm so glad that we were able to connect.
Same. And so the personal brand certification and digital brand certification program, Maria, is that do you offer that multiple times a year, or I know it's going on, right now. Is there another time that our audience can join?
Yeah, we'll offer it again in the fall. So late August is when we'll kick off that another class.
Awesome. I am so grateful to have connected with you, Marie. You are a wealth of information and it was so sweet and kind. And I appreciate you joining us today. And I hope our audience got a lot of value out of this. Feel free to connect with Marie or I. We'll drop links in the comment section afterward to Marie's website, also her LinkedIn profile, so you can reach out and learn more.
Yes, thank you. It was so nice to meet all of you in the comments. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. You guys have a great weekend. Thank you. Happy Friday.